I'm Elliot Chodoff, and welcome to Conflict Uncovered, your go-to podcast for in-depth analysis on the complex and dynamic conflicts shaping the Middle East, Israel, and the world. Join us as we delve into the latest developments, historical contexts, and the geopolitical forces at play. We bring you the insights you need to understand the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay engaged, and uncover the truths behind the headlines. Hi, it's the afternoon of July 31st here in Israel, and lots of things going on this week, so lots of podcasts to try to keep up. Last night, two major terrorist leaders were eliminated. In Beirut, Fuad Shukr, number 2 in Hezbollah, and in Tehran, Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas. Both were taken out within hours of each other. Israel took credit for the hit in Beirut and has remained silent about the hit in Tehran, although it's kind of hard to imagine that anybody else did it other than Israel. So let's break down what's happened. Let's see who these two people are, and also maybe try to figure out how effective is all of this other than the satisfaction of making the world a better place by eliminating two major terrorist leaders. So first, the strike in Beirut was the Israeli response, perhaps part of the response, but the response to the deadly Hezbollah attack on the soccer field in Majdal Shams on the Golan this past Saturday, in which 12 children were killed, dozens were wounded. In the Druze village, and the Druze community of Israel has been vocal in calling for a significant response in retaliation. For a variety of reasons, the response was delayed, and I won't go into what all the reasons were, but they had to do with certain social issues, certain political issues, just the realities of the situation. But last night, there was a strike, an airstrike in Beirut, killing Fuad Shukr. Shukr has been touted as the man responsible for the attack on Majdal Shams. It's a bit of an overstatement. He was the man behind the man behind the man. He was the person responsible for the missiles being in Hezbollah hands, but the people who actually did the lining up and the shooting were much further down in the organization than Shukr was. He had a long history that ended last night. He was an early member of Hezbollah. He was involved with the attacks in the early 1980s on the U.S. Marine Corps barracks in Beirut, which killed 241 American servicemen and women, 2 attacks on the American embassy in Beirut, 2 attacks on Israeli installations in the city of Tyre. He had very good murderous terrorist credentials, and he was the deputy of Imad Murnia, who was the number 1 builder of the violent arm of Hezbollah, which is what the organization is all about, and a major link to Iran. He was Murnia's number 2 until a joint effort by Israel and the United States eliminated Murnia in Damascus in 2008. And after that, Shukr, along with a few others, took over control of operations in Hezbollah, and Shukr is probably the most responsible for turning Hezbollah from a terrorist organization to a terrorist army. And the last of that group, the rest were eliminated, most of them by Israel, one of them by Hezbollah when he stepped out of line, and Shukr was left. He was not the chief of staff of Hezbollah, has been touted. He was the number 2 organization-wise under Hassan Nasrallah, but certainly the most important operative, the highest-ranking operative in the organization, and responsible for weapons acquisition, weapons development organization, and the like. So the strike against him had a number of elements to it. I consider it to be a very successful and excellent plan execution strike for both military and political reasons. After the 12 children were killed in Majdal Shams, the United States and the West very, very quickly said that Israel should not escalate. In other words, the killing of the 12 children wasn't escalation, but if Israel responded, it would be escalation. And when it became clear that Israel was going to respond, the U.S. in particular tried to pressure Israel not to strike in Beirut, and certainly not in the Dahia, which is the Hezbollah sort of main neighborhood. So Shukr was taken out in Beirut, in the Dahia. But America is now on the horns of a dilemma, because the State Department had a $5 million reward out on him for his activities in the Marine Corps barracks and the embassy bombing and so on. He was a well-known, declared international terrorist, and it would be kind of difficult for the United States now to condemn Israel for taking out this arch-terrorist that they had a $5 million bounty on his head for. So America's been silent about it. I'm sure they're biting their nails and worrying about the response. What response will there be? Very hard to tell. Hezbollah certainly can't let it go by without some sort of a response. But where and what and how, Hezbollah is well to managed with a very good strategic level of thinking, particularly by Hassan Nasrallah, that we might see a heavy barrage tonight. We might see rocket fire on Haifa or Tel Aviv, or we may see nothing. And in a month or two or three, an attack on an embassy, or as they've done in the past, a Jewish community center, which they did in Buenos Aires. So that's one of these. Time will tell, and Israel at least has to be prepared for any eventuality, which is also nothing new. Not much has changed on that. I will add that if this is the only response, it is inadequate. That is the only Israeli response to the Majdal Shams attack. It's grossly inadequate, and it's, while important in its own right, has no real immediate effect on the ongoing back and forth bombardment that's going on across the border between Israel and Lebanon, in which, although we're doing a great deal of damage to Hezbollah and its infrastructure, we're really taking the beating on it. The fact that nearly 100,000 Israelis have been evacuated from their homes now since October, there's no sign of them going back anytime soon. Every single day that's a reality is a Hezbollah victory, and they know it. They may very well decide to maintain the status quo because the status quo is working in their favor. Ismail Haniyeh was taken out in Tehran. He is the indisputed, elected by their own council, leader of Hamas. Haniyeh, too, has a long history. He was an assistant to Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, the founder of Hamas. He was in place as his advisor when Yassin was taken out by us decades ago. Shortly afterwards, Yassin's number two, Dr. Abdulaziz Rantisi, was taken out. And Haniyeh has been floating around the leadership, although only elected a few years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, has been floating in the leadership circles ever since then, along with Khaled Mashal, who's still out there, and of course the new generation of Yahya Sinwar, who's living in some tunnel underground somewhere under Khan Yunis, most likely. The two events on the same night were, in my opinion, coincidental, not planned as 1-2, except maybe at the last minute. In both cases, as in any takeout of this type, it's a question of the Israeli security services, most likely the Mossad, knowing that somebody is in the place where they can be hit, knowing in real time, with advance notice, knowing that they're going to be there for some time and enough time to get something organized, and then actually executing the operation. So this isn't the kind of thing where you can sit a week in advance or a month in advance or even many, many days in advance and say, okay, we're going to hit these two targets simultaneously or within hours of each other. The reason Haniyeh was in Tehran, over the past 6 or 7 years, he's spent virtually all of his time in Doha, in Qatar, in a luxury suite in the Four Seasons Hotel, with occasional visits to Turkey and to knowing that he was going to be in Tehran for the presidential inauguration made it somewhat easier to set him up. And the Israeli system, the decision makers, had made a commitment to the Qataris not to take out the Hamas leadership while they were in Qatar, keeping in mind this is all part of negotiations over hostages and ceasefires and the like. Israel did not want to aggravate relations with Turkey any more than they already are, and they are very bad right now. Did not want to aggravate relations with Egypt, which aren't bad, but they're strained given what's been going on in Gaza and along the Egyptian border. And there's absolutely nothing to aggravate with Iran. Iran is at war with Israel. It's a declared enemy of Israel. It calls for Israel's annihilation. During the inauguration that Haniyeh came to, the cheers were death to Israel, death to Israel. So irritating Tehran has no real diplomatic consequences. And whether they'll have military consequences, time will tell. But I'm of the opinion that Iran will take every opportunity to strike Israel when they get the chance. In other words, they don't need an excuse of us taking out Haniyeh. Last but not least, I think there's a fair question that needs to be asked. Does any of this matter? And the answer is yes, in particular with organizations, terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. And I want to parallel it with the idea of taking out or the loss of high-ranking officers in a military. The IDF lost a few high-ranking officers on October 7th, a couple of brigade commanders in particular, other officers of command rank. And, of course, every individual lost in the IDF, every soldier lost, every officer lost is a tragedy. From an organizational point of view, the impact is not that great. Now, I choose my words carefully. Obviously, the loss of a commander has a impact on the troops. But from a professional point of view, an army officer, regular or reserve, but typically regular, and this is true in the United States as well, and other armies, a regular officer serves in a position for a number of years, 3, 4, 5, depending on the military. And then they're moved to another position, whether it's a lateral move to a position of the same rank, typically between staff and command, or a promotion to another level of the organization, or alternatively, they're retired if they've finished their term of service and they have no place to go. What that means is that commanders have knowledge, they have experience, but it's varied, and that means lots of other officers also have that varied experience. They can step in. Whether they will be the same as the prior one, they might be better, they might be worse, but there are plenty of qualified officers of similar rank. And even if we go up to the chief of staff was appointed, but there were at least 2 or 3 other, and this is not just this one, but all of them, at least 2 or 3 other generals who were capable of being chief of staff who were passed over given the appointment. So there's depth. In organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah, and I mentioned this both in the case of Shukr and Haniyeh, these are people who have been in top positions for decades. They haven't moved, in the Shukr's case, for almost 40 years. Moved up one with Mornia's elimination, but that's it. And that means that there aren't a lot of other people around who have that kind of experience that can step into his shoes and pick it up that quickly. Now, over time, they can. But if you add to that, and here I'm going to specifically refer to Hamas, when over the past 8 or 9 months, we've eliminated a large number of their leadership. Mohammed Def, for example, his deputy a few months earlier, Marwan Issa. Sinwar is in the tunnels and somewhat out of contact, not completely, but an organization that has taken quite a few leadership hits over the past number of months is going to find it much, much more difficult to replace long-term, long-standing leaders who've been in the business for decades. So aside from the symbolism and aside from justification, in this case, there is a significant organizational impact in taking out leaders of that level. So that's where we are at the moment. Again, it's July 1st, afternoon in Israel. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you for listening to Conflict Uncovered. As always, it's been another rough day in the Middle East. We hope you found this episode insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share and recommend with your friends, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. For more in-depth analysis and exclusive content, join our community and follow us on social media. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the critical issues shaping the Middle East and the world. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.